Good morning to and welcome to the TechCentral TCS Plus show. It is super to have Anna Collard back in the studio today. I'm James Erasmus, and Anna Collard is the Senior Vice President and Evangelist of Content for KnowBe4 Africa. Anna, thank you. KnowBe4 Africa have just published a fascinating report called Cybersecurity and Awareness 2023. And that's what we're here to talk about. And our listeners are fascinated to understand and know more about cybersecurity, but quite specifically here on the African continent. Tell us more about that report, please, Anna.
Yeah, hi, James, and thanks so much to everyone listening in. It's good to be back. So what we do once a year in December, we go out and survey about 800 people across 7 different African countries. And those are consumers or people that they are employed, so that's one of the prerequisites, so they have to be employed. Most of them use smartphones, so maybe they're not necessarily a clear representation of your typical African person, but they sort of employed people that use technology. And even though it's just, it's about 100 users per country, so again, it's just like sort of a very small sample, but it does give us an indication, and we've done this 4 times, so in the last 4 years, it gives us an indication of sort of maybe just a trend or a small insight into, what the lay of the land is amongst the people themselves and how they perceive cybersecurity and what kind of threats do they come across, etc. And it's quite interesting to look at that over the years and sort of, provide some reports from an African point of view or African perspective.
And then for someone who's read the report, I was fascinated to see some of the stats that jumped out. But quite importantly, as a South African and an African, I was glad to see that there's an eclectic mix of different countries that you wouldn't necessarily assume one country should or shouldn't be included or discluded. But, and I mentioned South Africa, Botswana, Egypt, Ghana, Kenya, Morocco, Mauritius, and Nigeria were some of the other countries that were surveyed. And it was fascinating and we'll get into some of the stats, but it was fascinating to see that there is such a large portion of those business and internet users who don't really see or perceive a very high risk of cybersecurity to themselves and their businesses.
Yeah, I think what the report has shown is that the respondents do say, I think it's about 70% do say they are concerned about the cybersecurity risk, but they don't quite understand it. Okay. So, like, to qualify that, like, for example, we have one of the questions are, how confident are you to pick up a security incident? Now, I've worked in cyber for 20 years, and can tell you, no, I'm not confident at all, because if there's some, sophisticated sort of threat, you will not pick that up. But, to the average Joe, so a lot of the respondents said, no, they're quite confident. I think nearly half of them said they are very confident that they would pick up a security incident. But in the same token, I think 60% of them didn't know what ransomware was, for example, which is something that's, it's a threat that's been reported on in sort of the mass media quite a lot. So what we've deduced from that is this problem of sort of unconscious incompetence, is that on the one hand side, people think that they understand it, they are somewhat concerned about it, but they think that they would, identify it, and they're quite sort of confident about their own abilities, but in the same token, they actually admit that they don't understand it. I think also what that talks to us from an industry point of view, where we have to take responsibility, is that maybe we've done a good job in creating more awareness and fear and, sort of the whole FUD kind of fear, uncertainty, doubt kind of thing. But we're not teaching people practical steps and giving them advice on what to do about it. And that's something we have to do better, as an industry.
And also from an early age, I think for someone like you with young children, you're always teaching people to engage in a practice so that when they grow up, they are more aware of it. Discarding litter on the street. Similarly, in looking at cybersecurity, what to look out for. What are those markers? What are the identifiers? Which, as you rightly have said before, are becoming more and more and more complex, and the social engineering behind them means that oftentimes what you assume to be perfectly innocent is actually incredibly malicious.
Yeah, and I say that a lot, is that I believe being, sort of savvy in how to conduct yourself online, or understanding cyber safety, cyber security, that's no longer a tech skill. It's a life skill, because
Good
our
point.
lives are, we intermeshed with technology all the time. So, you mentioned it, you teach your children how to be smart on the streets and stranger danger and all of these kind of things.
Yes.
And we should do exactly the same type of awareness with the technologies that they're exposed to, and make it sort of second nature to, be critical, be vigilant, apply critical thinking. And the good thing, though, is that if we understand that, and you mentioned social engineering, social engineering is the psychological hacking of our emotions. And that's actually something that, because a lot of people are sort of fatigued. They're like, oh my God, this is so complicated. I will never be able to teach my children how to navigate, and I don't even understand it myself. But because social engineering is a human threat, we can then also appeal to people who are not technical to tap into their human intelligence and just use sort of a mindfulness practice and slowing down and just, whatever is incoming, whether that's a phone call, whether that's the super special crypto offer, whatever it might be, to just not react, particularly not if your emotions are triggered, and slowly, try and sort of apply to your executive functioning and your reasoning, and literally not trust anything, and then be slow in your response. Don't just react to a emotion that might be triggered on purpose, because that's what social engineering is all about. And
absolutely.
that's also something.
If you don't mind me just capturing on that point about complexity, is there's a level of fearfulness in the system where people are anxious about how complex cybersecurity is as a topic. And one of the things that KnowBe4 Africa does incredibly well is actually just bring a bit of pace, slow down that pace of information. And I think the report that we're talking about today does exactly that. It isn't incredibly complex. It isn't a difficult read, and it's broken down into very manageable bite-sized pieces. And it can be consumed by anybody who's listening to today's show.
Yeah, thanks, James. And it's also, it's like I think we'll put the link in the show notes. It's an ungated report. You don't have to type any details. You can just download it. And what we try to do is not just give you the perspective that end user view, which is the survey we run every December, but we've also included results from other surveys and polls that we run throughout the year. So another one that I found quite interesting is, for example, how much do people dabble in the crypto space, and how many of us have been scammed. And I thought that was really fascinating, that, and unfortunately, these crypto scammers are targeting countries in Africa in particular, with this whole notion of, let's bank the unbanked, and, like a lot of sort of sounding very good kind of, I don't know, like objectives or goals, but quite a large percentage of the people that responded, I think it was over 30%, said that they've either come across a crypto scam themselves, and then 60% know somebody who has fallen for a crypto scam. And that's a large proportion of the people that responded. And
it is. And I've actually written here, 1 in 3, so a third of your audience that were surveyed, of those as employees, click on suspicious links, emails, and fraudulent requests, or have clicked.
Yes, and I mean, that's the stat that goes way beyond that 800 users. So that's a stat that we see from the platform that we roll out, where we have over 6 billion users, and I don't know how many there are in Africa, but it's in the hundreds of thousands. So yeah, the 1 in 3 is still quite a concerning stat. It's not just the African stat, by the way. This is like a global average, that if you haven't been trained yet, if you haven't conducted any sort of awareness training yet in your user environment, then 1 out of 3 of your employees is very much likely to click on a phishing
It's frightening.
attack or phishing email. Yeah, no, it is,
frightening.
And that's why it explains why the bad guys or the criminals, adversaries are using that, right? Because it's so easy. I mean, it's much easier to trick a human than try to break through sophisticated security technology.
And one of the things the report talked about was how, unlike many other countries, African countries tend to use mediums such as, or channels such as WhatsApp for business communication. And clicking on a phishing scam or a link or something you shouldn't click on in WhatsApp is as bad as assuming it's protected by your email servers.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a couple of concerns that come with that, and I mean, you probably also, I mean, I know I do a lot of actually work-related things on WhatsApp, which I probably shouldn't, but it's just how it's culturally so
That's right.
immersed. You know, I talk to my customers on WhatsApp because I can't get hold of them on email. You know, I know that some of our partners in Africa, they only communicate on WhatsApp. And, you know, apart from the fact that the threat that you just mentioned, you know, WhatsApp is a consumer product. It has been, there are quite a lot of scams and sort of attacks from a cyber crime point of view. But apart from that, there's also the notion that, you know, the Facebook or the Meta companies in their TNCs, they say this is not meant to be used for non-consumer purposes. So, you know, if you, I don't know, exchange company sensitive information, that, yes, it's encrypted and all of that, but technically the Facebook Meta group has maybe a right to access that. The other thing is that because we use it so much for personal purposes as well, is that you never allow that employee to really switch off because, you know, like on the weekend, I use it for my family groups, but now I still see the work thing in there. So it's very difficult to have that boundary, and it can lead to mental health issues. So I think just in general, it's interesting to see how much WhatsApp is ingrained in our daily lives on the continent, and that maybe that's something, if you do run a company, and you haven't done so yet, I know the big corporates obviously have policies for that already, but to consider using an alternative that you can also switch off on the weekend, or you can keep your company data and your people's personal data separate. Yeah,
there are two critical topics you're talking about there, and the one is, you know, keeping company data separate from private, and the other is the busyness that we're experiencing. That having all your content in WhatsApp creates such risk for context switching that you jump between, you know, please pick up some milk versus, you know, click on this link.
Yes.
And I think we all need to be very, very cautious of that. And by engaging in training, by reading reports, by informing ourselves, we're at least being somewhat proactive, as opposed to reactive when we're crying and have, you know, ransomware against our company data and information. And we need to remain consistently vigilant day and night. So I was fascinated to read a lot of what the report was talking about, and how the continuity of the last 4 or 5 years we've been doing this report definitely talks about the fact that we haven't necessarily learned from the last 3 or 4 years and improved drastically. And the attacks are not diminishing. They're not going away. If anything, they're probably ramping up and getting smarter.
Yeah, exactly. Particularly with, you know, criminals having access to emerging technologies such as, you know, the large language models or the AI, you know, like ChatGPT, you know, have what's called Warm GPT, which is like the same functionality without limitations, without any sort of controls, is now available to criminals to use and automate a lot of their social engineering attacks. So whereas in the past I would have to manually research you, let's say, James, to write a phishing email that makes it more successful or more likable for you to click on, now I can use, with the click of a button, I can use this chatbot that does it for me, you know, and this is being licensed to criminals to use. So you don't need to have skills. You just need to know how to get access to this and then use it for your own nefarious purposes. And that
they're doing
makes
it at scale.
Scary. At scale, exactly, and much more effective, because now the chatbot can do the research for them, and it can create something that's customized for the target without the manual intervention, right? And then the other thing that's scary as well, and this is part of one of the polls or the surveys that we ran as well last year was, how many of the users or the people actually understand what deepfake technology is? How many of our people do question when they get, when they see a photograph or a video, is this real? And again, it's quite frightening that obviously a lot of them, I think it was 50-60%, said they've heard of the term deepfake technology and they sort of came across it, but a lot of them don't, and they still take information that they see on social media, by the way, on face value. And obviously with these, particularly, distributed via WhatsApp, these grandparent scams where the bad guys or the criminals use AI-driven technology or generative AI to create, deepfake versions of, for example, your kid, and then you all you need is 3 seconds of somebody's voice, and you can recreate whatever you want, and you leave these messages saying, "Hey, I'm in trouble. I need some money, please," being sent to their grandparents or their parents. And if it sounds like your kid or your grandchild, people will react because again, it triggers the emotions, right? So we have to have way more practical techniques and awareness that teaches people how to not fall for that. And a lot of it is actually not technical. It's more about, hang on a second, maybe I need a code word with my family that if and when something happens, you don't know that code word, then it might be a scam. Or who do I call to verify? Or just in general, if anyone, even your loved ones, ask you for money, you have to see them face to face. Don't even trust videos. So, brave new world. Brave new world.
And you and I have talked about this before, and I think the more we do talk about this, the more we are creating that continuous reinforcement of the logic. And we're urging our listeners and friends and families and colleagues of our listeners to actually spend a bit of time unpacking a topic that arguably you may not assume is going to affect you directly or your family directly until it does. And I think a lot of the training and the awareness that KnowBe4 Africa does is exactly that. And it's packaged in the right way that allows anyone to be a consumer of your content. And again, I say that report is exactly that. It's well indexed, it's easy to consume, and it definitely speaks to topics that perhaps haven't necessarily been all that deeply researched. Cybersecurity in the metaverse, for example. I think there's a lot in there that's worth exploring and just forewarning yourself and your colleagues about.
Yeah, thanks so much, James. And that's also something that, I'd love to get feedback from your listeners in terms of, is there a topic that they would like to see, something that we should reach out to the users, including our customers, and ask them to get some insights. I mean, obviously AI is currently the buzzword. We will run a survey very shortly, but there might be other topics that are of interest. So always happy to get feedback to see how we can expand the research.
I love that. And thanks, Anne. I think we're challenging the listener at TCS Plus to give the report some thought, see what it may be missing, see what you'd like to explore further, and really dive into the topic and get back to Anna with some ideas, questions, concerns of your own, because KnowBe4 Africa are just in such a great position to be, as they call themselves, the world leading security awareness training and simulated phishing platform. And that's why they've produced this report, and that's why the experts like Anna are there to hear us and listen to us and just give us that sound advice from a really practical level. So Anna, thank you very, very much for joining us here at TechCentral today. Thoroughly enjoyed this conversation as always, and we thoroughly look forward to many, many more.
Thanks so much, James, and thanks to everyone listening in.